So we are moving on again, and I'm really looking forward to spending the rest of the summer exploring the Brahma Viharas. These are the heart practices, which are also called the divine abodes or the four immeasurables. And just from their title, you can get a sense of how important they are to this path. They include metta, which is translated as loving kindness or friendliness or warmth. Karuna, which is compassion. Mudita, which means sympathetic joy or joy for another's well-being. And upekkha, which is equanimity or balance. In a recent Q&A here on the Daily Sit, someone asked a question about metta. They said, what about metta and why do we practice it? And it's such a good question, especially in these days, to remind ourselves, to remember why we specifically practice to engage our hearts on this path. In Pali, there's a word chitta, which refers to that part of us that thinks, feels, perceives, remembers, what we would likely refer to as our minds. But chitta means heart-mind, because in Pali, there's no distinction between our heart and our mind. They exist and work together within us. And this is pretty different from the Western perspective, where our minds and our intellect are really highly valued, and our hearts often get left behind. So I was thinking about this, about how even in elementary school, our grading system, which measures the success of each student, it's based on knowledge. It's not based on kindness or generosity or compassion. The goal of our education system is really to develop our intellect and not so much learn about our hearts. And this perspective gets baked into us as we mature. And in the process, kind of inadvertently, it shuts us off from the wisdom of our hearts. We all know where this leads. Ultimately, it feels pretty unsatisfying, incomplete, and causes a lot of suffering. And I think this is the reason many of us are here on the Daily Sit, because we know there's so much more potential to being human if we can learn to embrace our minds and our hearts. So we study the Brahma Viharas because they teach us how to bring the heart in and to learn the wisdom that the heart offers. We learn to nurture this caring aspect of ourselves, not in place of intellect, but certainly alongside it. And these practices, I think you'll find over time, they sensitize and tenderize the heart. As we learn to offer friendliness and warmth to ourselves and to others, and ultimately to all sentient beings, we can feel a movement inside from separateness to connection. And this connection, it changes us. It changes how we treat ourselves and how we act in the world. Because we don't want to act in a way that hurts others when we can feel that hurt also, and it hurts us. So over time, our wisdom clarifies and deepens. So how do we begin this practice? An untrained mind and heart may flounder, trying to hold all of the ups and downs of life. Some of us might have a habitual tendency to turn away and distance ourselves from what's difficult, while others may have a tendency to dive in too deeply and become overwhelmed easily. So where we begin, as we always say, is to start where we are. For me, when life becomes overwhelming in some way, I tend to kind of become numb. My heart constricts and I move through my life without a lot of feeling, be it pain or pleasure. There's a line that Mary Oliver has that has always spoken to me. She says, attention without feeling is just reporting. And I know what reporting feels like, because it feels like it includes a certain numbness. So my practice begins with first opening my heart to the numbness itself, holding it and getting to know it. And then with time, opening my heart more outwardly to the world. And doing this, I've learned, is where so much of life's richness is. So, unlike me, there are others who, when things become too much and their hearts are wide open, they get overwhelmed. They feel so much and become so involved that they might fall into kind of a paralyzing despair. Or they become giddy and hyper with joy. And they, in their practice, need to find a way not to close their hearts in any way, but to ground themselves and learn to step back enough to find balance. Of course, there are variations on these themes, and they might be more reflective of your habitual reactions. So it might be helpful to take a moment to kind of get to know what your habit of response is to the overwhelms in your life. As we practice the Brahma Viharas, we're training the heart to find a skillful response to the sufferings and joys of the world and not to flounder, to allow us to live in the world in a more responsive and a freer way. And we start with metta. The attitude of friendliness and warmth that is the home where our heart dwells is an underlying attitude that's foundational to how we are in the world. We practice to bring some degree of warmth and care to all of our experience, to our relationship with ourselves, to those we love, and to those we don't, and ultimately to all sentient beings with whom we share life. And it's a tall order, and it asks for a lot of patience. So we start where we can easily generate that warmth and let our heart's capacity deepen as we practice. Because metta is often translated as loving kindness, I think it can be misunderstood at times. Metta is different from the love we often think of that's attached to a person, our friend, our partner, our parent or child, even our pet. That's a love that, because it's attached, can also include suffering. And metta is a friendliness that's not attached. It's offered equally and is more universal and impartial. It's a friendliness we share because of our common humanity. So I just want to clarify for a minute, step back and just say that metta does not mean that we don't set appropriate boundaries with people that have harmed us in some way. And we can begin to look at those boundaries as really a form of metta towards ourselves. So if we're grounded in metta, really grounded, the other Brahma Viharas arise from this. When metta meets suffering in ourselves, in someone else, suffering of the planet, compassion arises. Our hearts are touched by the suffering. And often it's described as the heart's quiver in response to the suffering. When metta meets our own or another's accomplishments or pleasures, then joy arises. There's a lightness of heart, a sense of delight in someone else's good fortune without envy or jealousy. And when the wisdom of metta can hold all the joys and sorrows without resistance and with impartiality, then equanimity arises, leading to a deep sense of balance and calm. So each of these qualities rest on a beginning practice of metta. In each of these is a beautiful responsive heart that we can learn. So I'm going to end with another analogy by Biko Analio, that compares the Brahma Viharas to the phases of the sun. So a very different way of framing it, but maybe these images will help you feel a bit more viscerally these attitudes of heart. So he says, imagine that we're in a cold climate where the sun is experienced as something pleasant and positive. Then metta is like the sun at midday, which shines its rays on all without making any kind of distinction. It gives warmth and light to all who are receptive to it. Compassion is like the same sun at sunset when darkness is very close by. So even though darkness, which is a metaphor for the suffering of the world, so even when that darkness is very close, the sun shines all the more beautifully, coloring the whole sky. Sympathetic joy is like sunrise. Early morning when the birds are singing, when you can see a dewdrop on the branch of a tree, the sun shines and it sparkles like a diamond in the sun, in the light. And just so is the willingness to rejoice in the good fortune of others, an attitude that's totally removed from envy or jealousy. Equanimity is more of a standing back, a holding of the situation with awareness. So in this simile, equanimity finds its counterpart in the full moon, which reflects the sun. It also shines, but not as brightly. And it also gives some warmth, but not as strongly as the sun. It's balanced. So I really look forward to spending more time with each of the Brahma Viharas over the next weeks. And kind of my wish for all of us is that we practice to open our hearts so they become like the sun and the moon, shining on ourselves and all sentient beings. So thank you so much. And let's transition to our time of practice. And I think in the practice today that I am going to just over time drop in some of the more traditional metta phrases and They're for you to make personal for yourself, but they just kind of lead you in the direction. So, as always, let's bring the attention to our bodies. And even here, we can begin to offer a sense of friendliness and warmth. Not working hard and pushing through tightness, but just warmly offering some moves that might open our body a bit, help us to relax, help us to find a bit more ease. And all in your own time and pace, bring yourself into relative stillness. Maybe let your eyes close gently or have a downward gaze without a lot of distraction. And invite your attention inwardly. Just really feeling the sensation of being here, right now, in the room that you're in, on the chair or cushion that you're resting on. And letting your whole being settle. Oh, like a big exhale or a big sigh. And as your body settles, inviting your mind to also let go a bit of the day-to-dayness that it's so occupied with, and to find some moments of ease, resting on the body, perhaps the breath, perhaps sounds, anything that feels easy. And welcome yourself, all of yourself, to these moments. No matter what is arising, whether it's a pain or a distraction or some other kind of tightness, see if you can offer just a little bit of warmth to it. Letting go of any kind of constriction or resistance. May I be safe, peaceful, and free of suffering. May I be healthy in body and mind. May I be contented in my life. May I have ease of well-being. Thank you all for being here today, sitting together.